Okay, this January 2nd, 2019, I have to get used to saying that, 2019 meeting of the Oyster River Cooperative School Board will come to order. And I wish everybody a Happy New Year. And the first order of business is the approval of the agenda. And there is one change I'd like to ask for, and that is that the new middle school mission statement, which will be, there'll be some discussion of that from the architects who are here, to move that up after the approval of the minutes so that they don't have to sit through the entire meeting. Is that agreed? Okay, with that change, could have a motion to approve the minutes, or to approve the agenda. Denise?
Our motion to approve the agenda with that change.
Moved by Denise, second by Brian. All those in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor. The agenda is approved. So move to public comment. People have 3 minutes. Who would like to get us started? Okay.
Hello, I'm Darren Keller, live in Lee. I'm here to speak out about, as everybody well knows, we entered into a tuition agreement 4 or 5 years ago. We're about halfway into that contract. What I'd like to ask the board, a couple things. One, where do we stand? The number of students, where are we at with the long-range plan? There was at the time when that tuition debate happened, the discussion was about 7 or 8 years out that we would see the drop off to the point that it would impact programming at Oyster River. Well, now we're getting close to that point, and I can see with my own eyes, not only in my own subdivision, but 2 miles down the road, there is more housing going in, and I'd like to see where we're at. Do we really need to have these kids? Do we really need to be adding another community into our school system? And I'd like to see the board actually somehow, just like anybody else would in their job, have to give kind of a status report at some level. Where are we at? Where's the revenue? What are you doing? There was a lot of promises made. There was no commitment made as to where the money was going to be earmarked to. You can go and look in the 2013 forum. You'll see that it was just listed as ideas. There was no real commitment. So what I'd like to see is, where are we at? One, where are we at, and do we need those kids? Are we at risk that if the market and the economy stays good, that we can end up over the 915? I'd like to see that. And I think the other thing I would like to see is that as we come up for renewal, that any renewed contract also go before voters, that it doesn't stay with this board, that contract and tuition for forever. In fact, every contract should be even stated, but I think that should be left up to voters. If we ever reach a point where we think this is a bad deal, give us our voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
My name is Cecile Gunn-Desmond, and I am an advocate for world languages down into the elementary grades, and I just wanted to give a brief update of the parents who are in support of that, as well as read a letter from Cheryl Berman. She works in the Newington Public Schools, and she wrote a letter to the board, which I want to read part of, about her experience in expanding the world languages program to elementary grades, both in Rye and in Newington. So I'll just read a short portion of her letter here. She says, I began teaching in Newington in 2013. At that time, only Spanish was offered to grades 5 and 6 and was only a few years young. These students filter into Portsmouth Middle School in 7th grade. Only Spanish has been offered because the student body is very small, and offering 2 languages continues to be a time concern and logistics concern because classes are so small and grades are combined. After my first year, the student council members approached the school board strongly suggesting that Spanish be offered in the lower levels as well. A contract agreement was set forth to add Spanish to grades 3 and 4 the next year. Then we added grades 1 and 2 the following year, and we finally added kindergarten to the schedule the next year. Currently, Spanish is taught to grades K through 6 twice a week for 45 minutes each class. These classes are given in the afternoon along with other specials, and this allows classroom teachers to prep time during their day. The only obstacle that was easily overcome, because the building did not have an extra classroom, was the fact that I needed to be a teacher traveling with a cart, and I visit each classroom. So I'll leave this letter with the board. I also wanted to share that we had 2 community members step up to volunteer to be on a committee we hope that will be a strategic planning committee to explore world language options for expanding to elementary grades. Thank you.
Next. Other public comment?
Hi. I am Andrea Burkle. I live in Durham, and I am one of those people that volunteered to be on a committee to bring world language to the elementary level. So I'm a mom of 2 kids in Moheramet, and I'm really just here to show my support for bringing world language to the younger years for our kids. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, good evening. My name is Steve Wargiotis. I've come a couple of times before to speak in favor of world languages. I live at Oyster River. I have she's almost 7, still 6-year-old daughter who's at Mastway, fantastic school. And we've worked hard to get her additional language education. So she's in Spanish. I believe it's her 3rd year of Spanish already, and 2nd of Chinese. So she takes advantage of the Confucius Institute program-funded school activity. And I'm not going to repeat what I've said to you before. I'll remind you, yes, helps us be better world citizens. Yes, languages help develop the mind. And my undergrad degree in linguistics and cognition at UNH really reinforced and instilled in me a desire to make sure that, and if I had any children, I'd make sure they got a chance early. I'd also like to make a special call that if there's a way to make the scheduling work, having it occur more than once per week, even if it's for a shorter duration, would be really effective. I work in education now, mostly adult education. One of the things that we know works best is having higher frequency, getting exposed to the new challenges, the topics, the puzzles, the accent. Having it happen more frequently is more helpful than a big dose once, and then they don't see it again for a week or 10 days. So having it be frequent would be really helpful. And I know that my wife and I would be really happy to support any activity that we could to make sure that all kids get this kind of education. I studied a bunch of languages, and it may sound like I'm some privileged kid who grew up with a Porsche at age 16, but I grew up on welfare. My introduction to Oyster River was by living at Forest Park, while my parents were trying to go to school from getting a community college degree. And without exposure through Oyster River to French and then Spanish, I probably wouldn't have gone on and learned 4 other languages. So anything you can do to support it would help my daughter and all those other kids who can't afford it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm UC Terrell in Durham. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. You've heard a lot from the world language crowd. But I just wanted to say that to thank you for your support for considering our options, and as the district has done in other areas in late start time with the busing, the devil is in the details. None of the parents who are speaking to you want to do with less PE or less art or less anything, as we all know, right? And so I think that the formation of a committee to really dive into what these details would look like, to look at best practices in other schools. If there's anything this community is good at, it's the research and the development of options. And so we would like to move beyond this stage of saying that world languages are good, and to move towards an informed consideration of how, if and how, we would bring this to Oyster River. So my understanding is we may be at that stage, and thank you for your support to moving from proselytizing to a thoughtful consideration of moving ahead.
Take it easy. Other public comment? Thank you. We need a motion to approve the December 19th, 2018 regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion? Brian?
Motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from December 19th.
Moved by Brian. Is there a second?
I'll
Second by Dan? Okay. I I did mention to Laura that I think Michael's vote on the RESPA contract, it should be 401. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes, that's correct.
You're abstaining, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there other corrections? No? All those in favor of the December 19th, 2018 regular meeting minutes, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep?
No,
Oh, sorry.
I'm abstaining because I wasn't here.
You're in here. Okay, so could we vote again then? All those in favor?
601.
601. You're abstaining, right?
Yes.
Okay, 601. Okay, announcement. Okay, now we move to the architects, talk about the mission statement and the timeline, I believe. Thank you for coming, Ron.
Yep. Hi. Thank you for having us again. If you remember, I'm Ron Lamar from La Valley Brenzinger, and this is Ann and Lee from La Valley Brenzinger as well. I'm just looking for the connection to the screen. Without breaking any, all right, I got it. Is it okay if I just unplug this one? Yeah? Great. Thanks. So what we've done throughout the process is, and what we're showing here tonight, are a couple of things. One is a vision statement that's been worked on through all of our workshops, and the workshops have included community leaders, students, staff members, educators, and parents. And what we wanted to do was come up with a vision for the new school. The other thing we would like to talk about tonight is essentially the time frame. So the schedule we had presented a little bit earlier, as well as the next steps going forward. So again, thank you for those who participated in some of these workshops. The goal of the workshop was basically to come up with a story. And so what you see here in front of you and on the screen is the conversation we had about every school has a story. The story here has been talked about sustainability, academics, and safety. And that would be the theme for the new Oyster River Middle School. We came up with statements of significance based on our visioning exercise with the community leaders, the students, the staff, the educators, and the parents. And these statements are our guiding principles. These principles will ensure meaningful and memorable planning decisions are made throughout the process of creating your new environment. And these principles also ensure that strategies and measures are implemented within the design to include indicators of quality that support that vision. So when people say, how do we know we're designing a quality school that's going to last for decades and generations to come, we can refer back to this statement. I would also say that many of you who attended, you noticed that we kept asking the same question to see what answers we get. So as groups moved in and out of the workshops, we wanted to continuously ask the same questions, because what we were trying to do is find out if everybody's saying the same thing. And if they weren't saying the same thing, what the differences were. It's building consensus about your vision statement, but it's also building a quality vision statement that is not one voice, but many voices. With that, we came up with 8 of them. One standing out as building as teacher. I know you have these in front of you. If you don't mind, I'll just read quickly through them so that folks at home know what that means. But building as teacher means our new middle school will be a teaching tool for environmental sustainability that provides optimal learning spaces that meet the needs of all students within a student-centered environment composed of flexible teaching spaces that promote a variety of instructional practices for multi-sized collaborative groups and individual work. So that sounds like a long run-on sentence, and interestingly enough, the students had as much to say about that as the educators did. So this is a collaborative statement, if you will, as they all are. The second one was to create an inclusive environment, and that is our new middle school spaces will be fully accessible, ADA compliant, and supportive to all individuals with and without disabilities, designed to meet all acoustical, physical, medical, emotional, lighting, and academic needs. The next one is student-focused building, that our students will experience an efficient and well-designed school focused on logical organization of classrooms and traditionally non-instructional spaces to create an integrated learning environment which minimizes travel time by providing right-sized and conveniently located student storage spaces. You can see that that was really driven by the students and the educators themselves. Anytime and anywhere learning is a principle that says our efficiently designed school will optimize our students' learning experience by supporting an enhanced master schedule, which allows for more academic time due to optimized spatial connections, right-sized spaces, specialized music spaces, enhanced PE spaces, and a dining space that accommodates 2 lunches. Very important to sort of transition at this point to build a facility that has 2 rather than 3 lunch periods, which works better with the schedules. An environment to support learning, our furniture, equipment, and technology systems will be purposefully selected to support adolescent development needs and provide flexibility in teaching practices, whereby products and infrastructure systems support current and future technologies while radically reducing the carbon footprint of our middle school. During the workshops, we all talked about sustainability in every piece of the building fitting in. A safe and secure, welcoming, and inspiring facility. Our new school will provide a safe and secure environment, including carefully designed traffic and pedestrian flows that create an inviting and attractive main entrance, while sustainably designing indoor and outdoor spaces that provide learning experiences and student work display opportunities. The next one is a future-ready environment. Our school will be a flexible design to support future changes in education and to ensure future occupants of this school will say, and this is a quote, "This building was well designed to meet the needs of the children." It's very important to everybody who participated that the building itself stands the test of time and is able to evolve with education and technology as we go forward. The last one that you see here is a community-centered. Our ORCSD community will utilize a state-of-the-art facility, sustainable facility that supports year-round community events, continue establishing relationships with UNH and the public library through offering classroom and specialized spaces such as the gym, a music hall for community and/or recreational use. So that, in a nutshell, were the guiding principles that evolved out of these workshops that we had. Any questions about that?
Okay.
Yep.
One comment, if you go to the very top again. And it's certainly not big, but it just strikes me that we have sustainability, academics, and safety. And certainly sustainability is incredibly important to me, and I'm sure to the board. But I think academics should really lead that statement off, and perhaps safety even be second there. And knowing how important sustainability is, but really the key here is academics. And so just the way it's listed just strikes me funny. So it's just...
Take a shot at it, right? Academics was first until we just figured out what the acronym would be. And so... And that worked.
Maybe we could think of a fourth thing.
I'll take a crack at that too, because I think you have to think more holistically when you talk about sustainability. It's not just about carbon footprint, but the sustainability is that the classrooms will be functional for a long period of time, that they actually do meet the needs that you're trying to get, that the building actually functions effectively. That's kind of wrapped into the sustainability argument.
Yeah.
So that word sustainability appears 3 or 4 times in this, but what does it mean? And how will you know after you've designed this building if it's going to achieve that?
That's a great question. So educationally, and I tell people this all the time, and they think, is he telling us he fails at what he does? Nothing makes me more proud of the work that I do and the work that our team does at La Valley Brensinger than when we walk into a building 5 years after it's built and they're not using it the way we designed it to be used. They're using it a completely different way, and it works perfectly for what they're doing. And that, to me, is educationally sustainable. Another example of that is in the 1970s, they did open classroom concepts. It was a theory and a trend that was way too far in front of its time. And what it meant was if you did a lecture-learn curriculum, it didn't work because everybody's trying to talk over everybody else. But if you were doing a project-based curriculum, which nobody was doing in the 70s, it didn't work. So had those buildings been designed sustainably for an educational sustainability, you would have been able to have project-based learning and lecture-learn in the same facility. It didn't matter. It would support both. So sustainability from an educational point of view is that the building doesn't have to be renovated or changed or knocked down or whatever just because the pedagogy changes and just because the approach to education changes, and that includes technology. Sustainability is also the carbon footprint, which we talked about. Wouldn't it be great if over time, first of all, when the building opens, it has a certain level of self-sufficiency, if you will, but over time, as new technologies come out, you're actually saving more and more money to the point where you're not spending any money on the facility, it's taking care of itself, even to the point where now you could be net positive, where you're actually generating more electricity or more power than you actually need in the building. So that's another level of sustainability. The other piece of sustainability is the building's going to be here for generations, right? So it has to look, feel, and taste like a school for decades to come. So that means when your elementary school kids have grandchildren in elementary school, they show up and they are just as inspired and just as enthused to come and learn as their grandparents were when they showed up. And so it sustains itself within the community in that aspect. So I think it shows up here many times because during the workshops, everybody was talking about sustainability a little bit differently. Yep.
Can I throw one more in there? Economic sustainability, and that is that once you build the building, that actually it meets the function and that we aren't coming back and saying, oops, we should have done this, or oops, we should have done that. And then, because I just did this as a pay-as-you-throw unit pricing, so the sustainability I threw out were environmental, which is what you just said, the academic area, and then economic, how can the community afford this, and how down the road, 20 years, the building, we aren't saying we have to add on and knock out walls and do huge things. So that's just my 2 cents on those.
Kenny?
So Al, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think you're right about the nuance of sustainability. I think to look at it, though, as we launch this to a community and have the ability to make a sophisticated argument, I guess, to kind of sell it. And I think that's why that hits me more. So I'll throw something out because I think it's another thing that's really important. And certainly you could have it within sustainability, but I would think one of our big board things through all the years is emotional well-being. And then that gets rid of that acronym and we can throw that in because I think the design of the building so speaks to emotional well-being, of giving students places to hang out that are safe, that are comfortable, having that opportunity to be small group, large group, just having a space that has light, that has feeling that a building is open rather than closed in. To me, that's really one of the big drivers to try to get that new middle school was it's a very oppressive environment in our dark, closed-in middle school, and we want to open that up, and people feel better in open. So I just throw that out.
I think it's already listed in there under, it's already listed there under an inclusive environment. New middle school spaces will be fully accessible, ADA compliant, supportive to all individuals with and without disabilities, designed to meet all acoustical, physical, medical, emotional, lighting, and academic needs. So it's in there.
So it's in there, so, but maybe
Make it
to
in the
make it some of the, because people read the blurb, people don't read the story, and sometimes the blurb is helpful. And, that's,
No, these are great suggestions. Any other comments? So, just moving on to the schedule, we had presented, when we last met, or a few meetings ago, an overall schedule. And the overall schedule, let's see if I can't make this as big as I can. Started off with our kickoff meeting in September. What you see down the bottom here is what we've been doing between September and the holidays, and that is the visioning and planning sessions we just talked about. And now we have a mini timeline that we'll share with you in a few minutes about what we're going to do from now until mid-March, the vote in March. And then, all things going according to plan, by the end of May, we should have schematic design done so that we can present that to you and obviously work with you during the process, but come to you with a quote-unquote final schematic design so that you'll know exactly the size of the building, the cost of the building. Bowen Corporation will at that point have a schematic cost estimate for you. And we will have images that you can look at and say, that's what our building's going to look like. So we have a lot of work to do together as we move now until end of May. And then that timeline will lead into us working throughout the summer, and when everybody comes back in September and October, we would have design development completed. So again, it's another update for the board. And then by the time, or this time next year, we're preparing for the deliberative session in March of 2020. And by that time, we would have the project completely defined and even working into a fast track so that when the vote passes, we go right into construction. The other part of that schedule is we would start construction in May of 2020 after the March vote, and then we would complete portions of the building in February of 2022 and be completely done with the knocking down of the existing building and the play fields and the parking and so forth for an opening in September of 2022. So with that, the mini schedule that we're talking about is obviously presenting this to you tonight. We have a faculty focus group scheduled for January 9th. We want to get more information specific to the teaching and the education that takes place with these focus groups on January 9th. After that meeting, we're going to start coming up with educational planning diagrams that'll lead into concept design diagrams. And our goal is to have those diagrams and maybe a massing model, if you will, not a 3D model, but, you know, images so that you see the scale, the mass, the size of a building that we're talking about on the site. And we're going to try to do some of those graphics and have those prepared for deliberative session. And then we would go out between February and March of deliberative session and really reach out to the community. Number one, just to tell them the work that's been done and to get their feedback. And to let them know that we're really starting in earnest after the March vote.
So just when, between, say, now and May, when would you be coming back? I'm just trying to just visualize the just the communication between you and the board, between, say, now and May, when you'll have something much more defined.
So we usually do a monthly update. Every client's a little different. Sometimes we do more, sometimes we do less. Sometimes the board will ask us to put together a very specific schedule in terms of like milestones, if you will, along the path. I think with the schedule that we have going, in order to get this by May, I would recommend a monthly check-in with the board to come here and present and get feedback from you for everything we're doing. We obviously want to show you everything that's going on before you read it in the newspapers. And we also want to make sure that we have a lot of community engagement. So we also want to keep the community up to date as to what we're doing and why we're doing it, and allow them to get their feedback in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it, so that they understand the process and, you know, really the why behind what we're doing. Does that work monthly?
I think that would be good.
Okay.
So just, is that agreeable with everybody?
Yeah, it sounds.
Okay, good. Other questions?
Looking ahead to 2020, in October, you provided us with some comparable or some other cost and size of other school buildings that your firm and other firms have worked on. most of those are considerably more dollars either per square foot or per student than what we've been talking about so far. And the only one that was less than that was 5 years old.
Which one was that?
Quinn Middle School, Hudson, Mass.
Okay.
Was $300 a square foot. The rest of them are $430, $470, $480.
Okay.
So that puts us up $5 to $10 million more than we've been talking about.
Okay.
Help us have some confidence that the $45, $46 million target that we've been talking about is realistic.
Okay. So let's see. We talked about a construction cost of $2.50. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Right, start immediately.
And that's on paper. So, no, we are $250 a square foot. So I don't remember which schools we gave you to look at. Anything obviously in Massachusetts is a little bit of a twist, if you will, because there are prevailing wage and construction laws in Massachusetts that don't exist in New Hampshire. So the labor is a lot more expensive in Massachusetts. And it's a different bidding environment with their laws. So in New Hampshire, I would say to look at the Salem High School. And again, it's difficult because New Hampshire has not built a lot of middle schools in the last several years. A lot of the high schools are both high schools and career technical centers. So they have a lot higher costs per square foot just because of the equipment that goes into those buildings. So if you want confidence, I would say that you're building a very similar sized building to Wells High School. Wells High School was an academic high school, so there wasn't career and technical education involved in that. And that construction cost was $178 a square foot, and that opened in September 2016. That was an addition and renovation. We renovated the gym, and we renovated the cafeteria and the auditorium into a performing arts center, and all of the academic areas were new. So there was some savings in the fact that we didn't have to build exterior walls, foundations, although it was a whole new roof for energy efficiency on those renovated spaces. But at the same time, the construction schedule was an extra year because of the occupied phasing. So let's consider that a trade-off. Economic times always change. So the benefit that what you have is not LaValle Brenzinger trying to just give confidence in a number, but that number comes from Bowen Corporation. And so Bowen Corporation is the construction manager who will actually be building the project and working closely with their metrics of what buildings cost and the work that they've done for you here in the district and so forth. They've come up with the $250 a square foot, which we feel is comfortable because we have a building right now, school right now, that's going to go out to bid in Maine, and we've estimated that at $216 a square foot. So again, it's all relative. Every school, well, like I said, every school has a story, right? We have another project that's under construction, and the site cost alone on that project is $17 million. So if you factor in that site cost into the cost per square foot, it obviously becomes much higher. The numbers that we gave you in October was $250 a square foot for construction cost. That did not include the additional $3 million for site work, which is what we had in there for site work. It also didn't include the monies for demolition, so that also adds to the square foot number. And then it didn't include all of the soft costs that go along with it. So what we did to establish this budget is actually build it piece by piece, as opposed to saying, hey, we just did a high school in Wells that cost $178 a square foot, so we'll go with that. I believe our building at 46 million, all right? My calculator. Can't do this in my head. So at 46 million, if we were to divide that by the 600 square feet that we were talking about, it's $336 a square foot. So given the fact that there's no site acquisition costs, given the fact that there's no infrastructure costs in terms of bringing electricity here and so forth, and water and such, we are, I mean, simply put, we're comfortable at the $336 per square foot. There's always a balance. I mean, as an architect, I'd always say, if you have more money, we'll take it. Because if it always comes in less, then that's a good thing. But what we don't want to do is overpromise and underperform, right? So I think what we have here is something that the construction manager has said he's comfortable with and that we've said we're comfortable with. So if there's any way for us to help get you more comfortable with what we're doing, we'd like to help out doing that.
Ron, what's your track record in your initial estimate and then by the time you get to construction? In other words, how often are you on the mark, or how often are you higher, or how often are you lower?
We've been lower several times. I don't think in the last 7 years or 8 years, I've had a project that was over budget. We have had projects where an owner says, you know, we're going to buy all that equipment, and then the bids come in and they say, let's somehow try to get that equipment into the project. So if you don't change the rules, we're pretty confident that we're gonna hit this. The other benefit that you have is this is a construction management at risk process. So as we're designing this project, you have Bowen Corporation who's able to say, hey, you know, the price of steel is going up through the roof. So we can consider looking at timber frame or wood framing, if you will. They could come back to us and say, you know, the labor force for concrete or studs or whatever, you know, we can't find those labor forces. They have the ability to go out and hire multiple subs as opposed to just one subcontractor, which you can't do in other states under different procurement laws. So we have a project right now, in fact, we have 2 projects right now, where the CM has hired 2 different concrete companies. And they've hired 2 different drywall companies. Because the subcontractor pool is just not there. And the ability for them to do that means the school's getting done on time and they're getting competitive pricing because obviously they have more than one subcontractor. So it's just a measure of cost control in the fact that you have a construction manager working with us. We can react to industry factors that we wouldn't know about unless they were on the job. So,
What kind of construction cost inflation are you assuming over the last couple of years and over the next couple of years?
So in other words, I think what Andre is doing is projecting this to the midpoint between 2020 and 2022. Mm-hmm. So in today's dollars, we'd be budgeting this at basically, like I said, we have a project going out to bid in the next few weeks at 216. We're budgeting yours at 250. The construction type will be very similar. They have a masonry building. It's a very, they got a geothermal system. It's a very high efficiency building. It's a high performance school. I could envision your school being very similar in terms of the cost and quality of the materials. A lot of linoleum, tile floors, good robust systems that are going to last for a long time. So if you look at the difference between the 216 and the 250, that's the escalation that he's talking about. If you ask me without Andre's input into this, I would say you should carry at least 5% a year. So I would have stood here today and said, you know, 220. Maybe I wouldn't have gone to the 216 knowing that you're not going out to bid in the next few weeks. But if we started at 220, you know, adding $30 to that is more than 10%. So, you know, doing that at like 12 or 15% for a year of inflation is pretty safe. I will also say that that's also the reason we're fast tracking the project, which means when the vote passes, traditionally, so to your question of how many times have we, traditionally what happens is the vote passes in March. We don't start construction until the fall or the following spring, because we actually, you know, we don't do all the design work up front. You're allowing us to do the foundations and the steel up front, which means your votes will pass in March. You'll be under construction in May. You're saving months of construction escalation that you're not going to have to face. And so that also has to get factored into what Andre has put together. So it's a lot of back and forth. None of us have crystal balls. You know, something could happen tomorrow. Maybe a tweet would be sent out and some other economic factor will come into play. We don't know. But at the same time, you know, by the time this goes out to bid next May, May of 2020, yeah, there could be a slowdown. You know, there could easily be a slowdown where all of a sudden concrete contractors do want the work, you know, and they have the workforce to support them. So the good news is that we have a responsible budget, I would call it, that we can react to and make sure that it works for what you're trying to do.
Other questions? Great, so we will schedule like monthly updates.
That would be
I think
great.
that'd be a really good thing to do.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you
thank you.
all. Good
Thanks,
to see you
everybody.
again.
And
Okay, announcements, commendations, and comments from the district. Are there any?
First? Okay. Good evening. I just wanted to inform the school board and thank the school board for their continued professional development for faculty. I'd like to let you know a little bit about some of the professional development opportunities that the high school faculty have been taking advantage of. One is their work around assessment and grading, specifically standards-based assessment and grading, and the exploration through conversation and some piloting and actions within the classroom around that. Last year we had a group of around 10 faculty go to see Tom Gusky regarding grading and reporting. He wrote the book On Your Mark, which is a fabulous book about grading and reporting within the high school. Also, recently we had a group of faculty, again around faculty and administration, around 10 this year, go to see Rick Warmelli in Portland, and he also discusses grading and assessment. And the conversation that has occurred from that has been fabulous, and faculty have decided, departments have decided to really focus on that this year, and that is, for the most part, in all our departments, their department goal has been set around competencies, standards, and assessment, and how they're assessing student learning. Along with that, I just also want to let you know that the science department, collectively as a department within the high school, they will be going to the New Hampshire Association of Supervising and Curriculum Development conference around this next-gen science standards, and talking a little bit about next-gen science within the high school setting, instruction, and how next-gen science standards are implemented through practice and instruction, and that will be happening later next week also. So those are two exciting things that have been happening within the high school, and I just want to thank you for your continued support. I also would like to, I know Patty's going to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened over vacation in regards to our athletic events, but I'd like to thank all of the parents, the boosters, and also Andy Lathrop, and also Mike Feld, the athletic trainer, for all of their efforts over vacation. We had 2 home tournaments occur. One was within the basketball program, the other was the hockey program. That takes a lot of time and effort and energy for the coaches and for Andy and Mike, and they went fabulously, and I know Patty will talk a little bit more about the results. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Carrie Vaish from Massway. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We had a busy shift over vacation, and before vacation we got the classrooms set up and the music room all moved in, so kids were great, and over vacation we were able to move into our new office, which was great. We were a little messy today, but we figured it all out. We were really happy this afternoon to be able to actually dismiss through the front entryway, and it was pretty great. I will send you all some pictures, because the kids walked out and looked up through that skylight, and I was like, get ready, guys, and they all looked up and just were amazed. I thought, this is the coolest school ever. So they had a great time, so thank you, all of you. Pam Felber, again, wanted to graciously extend her thanks. The kids made some beautiful drawings and words of thank you, so please, if you get a chance to take a look at that. You certainly made our 2019 kickoff on the right way, so thanks very much.
Thank you. Others? From the board, announcements, commendations, comments? Denise?
I'd like to commend all the students who contributed to Foster's Holiday Art and Writing Contest. The Oyster River School District was well represented, including one from the daughter of one of our school board members here. But there was artwork and writing from kindergarten, well, I don't know about kindergarten, but first grade all the way up through high school, and the students did a great job.
Thank you. Others? No? Okay. Okay, Assistant Superintendent's report?
I will be brief, but I did want to just mention the deadline for sabbatical applications for our staff is coming up. January 15th is the deadline. I'm not going to get into details with you about any of the specific proposals, but I have had multiple staff reach out to me, and there's some very exciting proposals that are going to be on the table for us to consider. So it's very exciting that our teachers are really benefiting from it, from the concept. I think even those that are proposing sabbaticals that may or may not get them, I think it is challenging them to think a lot about their practice, and it's really started to create some really great conversations with our professional staff. This year, as you know, Chris Hall has been in the process of having hit the first sabbatical granted in this district, and I think it's like 17 years. I've invited him to come during my curriculum instruction report next meeting to give you a brief update on how things are going, just to give you a sense for where things are at. I won't spoil the surprise. There's a lot of great research being done by 17 of our faculty in the action research format. There's a lot of really exciting stuff that's taking place, and Chris is doing a great job. So we're really getting a real bang for our buck with investing in this sabbatical concept. So thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent's report?
So I just have a couple of reports. I did want to bring you up to speed in terms of where we are on the advisory committee related to Orchard Drive. We had our first meeting, and I just wanted to take a minute to just let you know who's on the committee. Malin Clyde. Malin was one of the parents who spoke at the public forum we had. She was the person who wrote the incredibly well-written letter that started us all thinking about whether this land should go into conservatorship or not. So she's on it. Al is on it. Dennis Meadows, gentleman who spoke to the board very enthusiastically about trying to keep this property in its natural state. Kenny's agreed to be on it. Ellen Snyder, who's the president of the Wildlife Consulting in the town of Durham, and Sue. So it was an interesting first meeting. What basically Dennis and Malin laid out was that, none of the big conservatory organizations would be involved in a project this small. And so what they foresaw is a year of local fundraising. I gave them the goal of about $150,000 that would feel like a comfortable number for the district to turn the property over. Yet to be determined is who they turn the property over to. I think that the committee is leaning now towards the town of Durham, and largely because of the accountability. Like the school board, the town has elected officials where citizens can voice their preferences, and the university doesn't have that same forum, so that's where they were headed. The interesting thing I would say is that both Malin and Dennis felt like they could take a leadership role on this and just keep Sue and I informed. In other words, we don't have to be actively engaged in bringing this committee together. Dennis and Malin would bring the committee together. They would take charge of the fundraising, and they would report back to us. So I just thought it was a really great meeting, and I was surprised at the end of it how much they wanted to do in terms of actively being involved, and I was pleased, quite frankly, because, I mean, this is outside both Sue and I's comfort zone, and both of them have done this kind of work in their adult life, and they were very enthusiastic about doing it. So that's that group. Any conversation, any questions from the board related to that? Right. And then the other thing that you asked me to do is come back with a charge. I asked at the last meeting if it would be okay to form a superintendent's a committee on world language. And so I came up with this charge, and this would be to investigate current research related to effective elementary world language programs, to identify the obstacles faced, and to present best practice options for the board's consideration by November 2019. And as you heard from some parents tonight, they're willing to be on the committee, which is wonderful. Todd reached out to the world language staff. They're willing to be on the committee. And I think this is the work that we need to do so that we can have an informed discussion in the fall related to what our best practices, what are the obstacles we'd face in implementation. I mean, some of them are very obvious, some may be less obvious. And then what are the best practices? So, for example, in one of the sabbatical proposals that a teacher reached out to Todd, as a world language teacher, she actually wants to take a sabbatical to do this very work. And she had already identified 5 school systems in Massachusetts that are clearly state-of-the-art schools doing world language in the K through 5 area where we're not. And then she wants to do the research and what is the best practice. So we have a world language teacher at the high school who is likely to put forward a proposal around this very issue, and I think we couldn't ask for more from our world language department. So that's the charge I came up with. Obviously, it's subject to the 7 of you saying, add this or delete that, or modify this or delete that, but I thought this covered the bases of the conversation we had at the last meeting, and so I wait for your approval.
I just had a question, like, it seems you're going to investigate current research and practice, aren't you? You're not,
yes.
Okay. I mean, because, I think to look at schools who are doing it, that wouldn't necessarily be research, that would be places that have implemented it. I assume that's implicit in this, is that?
Exactly.
Okay. Then as long as that's understood, because research would seem to be too narrow, okay?
Yeah, no, that's why these schools in Massachusetts that have already been identified, now we know where to visit.
Okay.
You know, optimal programs.
So, I mean, the obstacle is, I sound like a broken record on this obstacle because it's the most obvious obstacle, which is how do you fit this in the schedule?
Yep.
So it's like, I think that should be clarified because I understand, like, we really do want to broaden it, but when I look at how we're kind of cramming, it's almost like pounding a square peg into a round hole. We're trying to make the entire school day fit around the program, which is not actually best practice. So I think in the charge, it really should be implicit, how can this fit in the middle school and elementary schedules?
Sure, and so I put including how world language would fit into the schedules. That capture it?
Yep, it's perfect.
Yep. I mean, Jay and I had that conversation.
It's the toughest one. It's the
David and I have had that conversation. Carrie and I have had this conversation, so it's a conversation that we definitely are having.
I just think let's start with that premise, because if we're going to go to November to say, like, this is how we could do it and not address what's the primary obstacle, will seem like a waste. I mean, again, we'll have to then start, like, investigating the scheduling, and I'd rather just have it combined in the work group, that we just do that work as we go forward.
Makes sense.
My concern is the time. I think we heard a lot of different specific concerns from parents that are closer to this issue. One of them was the current gap in the Mandarin program between the elementary and sixth grade. And if we don't hear recommendations until November, we've not only missed the strategic planning cycle, which we've kind of already missed, this will have to be part of that, doing this will be part of that, but we also missed the fiscal year 2021 budget cycle, at least the first pass at it as well.
Yep.
So I think we should be looking for a preliminary report in May and a final recommendations in September instead of November.
Is that workable?
Yep, as long as we understand that preliminary means preliminary, I think we can get there.
Well, the reason for the preliminary in May would be if we do think there's a chance of addressing the fifth grade Mandarin gap, that's the chance to do it for the next school year, potentially. Otherwise, it's not happening, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then September is in order to have it for the next budget cycle. Otherwise, again, we're out a whole nother year probably.
Yep, makes sense. Denise?
And I'm fine with that, except that understanding that the recommendation may be that, again, because of the middle school situation, that nothing, there's not, the obstacles may not be able to be overcome within the year. I mean, that may be one of the possible recommendations, is that, we just can't fit this in as things can't currently stand. So.
Well, I think it goes down to when Tom had alluded to the issue of, or maybe it was just Al, the idea of what do you give up in order to incorporate. I mean, there's always going to be choices, and, I've been very upfront with everyone that part of our obstacle is the building itself.
Right.
The current building is a major obstacle for us. And, I use Suzanne's work on the master schedule and Jay's work on the master schedule, and Suzanne was able to look at her master schedule in terms of the educational needs of the student. And currently, Jay has to look at his master schedule in terms of what can the building hold. And it's a much different approach because his has to be practical, where Suzanne could look at it from a philosophical point of view. Right. So we know that the current building is an obstacle. Now, having said that, Jay is a master, so we'll see.
I was going to say the other thing that's kind of interesting that you say that is that, here we just had a presentation from the architects, and so in some ways the report on the language should be feeding into the architects as they're designing the building.
Which is exactly what he's doing next week when he's meeting with the content people. He'll be meeting with the world language people, and they're going to be sharing exactly this very issue. Yeah. So modify with those two thoughts in mind. Do you want me to come back next meeting with a modified version, or just to incorporate these two ideas into it and move forward? Ken?
So I tremendously support world language, and I think on the board I've spoke for world language a lot. I am trying to get my hands around this committee because I'm reading the minutes from the last meeting, which I was not at, but reading it just in the minutes Tom's concerned, hearing the point that Al raised and Al raised again. Are we putting the cart before the horse? And in a way, should we have our middle school principals and our middle school principal and our elementary school principals define that there is a reality, that the elementary school, and to me, language would, I would put that as a precedent, but can they find the spot during that day in elementary school? And I agree with the comment made that once a week with a smattering doesn't get you far, and hear from Jay that, yep, we can do this with our current middle school. And once we hear that that can work, then I would see have the committee go, but I'm worried about charging a committee with something, and the dead end is
Can I take that and flip it back the other way, Kenny? So I don't know that Jay or David or Carrie can address that issue until we've defined what the program is. So the committee will help us determine what the latest research says and what's best practice. But best practice in any research I've looked at is multiple times. So once we know what the format of the program could be, then we turn to our administrators and say, how would we fit a program, or could we fit a program like this in our current structure? So we need to know what the program is before Jay and Carrie and David can say, I can or can't do this based on the limitations I have.
I would advocate that that really happens concurrently.
Well, they're on the committee. Yeah, they absolutely, that's one of the obstacles we face. So if we come up with a model, then Carrie and David would say, well, this model works or doesn't work, and Jay would say the same, that they're going to be on the committee, because I can't do this without them. Anybody can do research. Anybody can look at best practice. When you come out with a recommendation of what would work in Oyster River, I need the administrators there to say, I can make this work or I can't make this work.
Definitely, and that's why I raised that is.
Yeah, they're right there with me.
So could you maybe just summarize the additions, and then we can maybe get a motion to...
Sure. So let me try this. To investigate current research related to effective elementary world language programs, to identify the obstacle faced, including how world language would fit into the master's schedule, and present best practice options for the board for consideration, for a preliminary report to the board in May, with a final report in September 2019. How did that work? That capture?
So could I have a motion to approve that? Yeah.
So moved, as Jim
Moved
stated.
by Al, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Michael. Further questions? You didn't add "and practice," but I'm just going to assume that that's implicit in what you mean by research. So, okay, ready to vote on it? All in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor, the charge is endorsed.
Thank you very much.
Others, are you done? Is that it?
That was it. I only have the two items.
Okay.
Yep.
Business administrator? Are you going to come later? Okay. Student Center report?
So as Ms. Philippone mentioned, we had 2 home tournaments over vacation. One was hosted by the boys hockey team who won their tournament.
Good.
And the other was hosted by the boys basketball team that got 3rd in their tournament. There were also swim and track meets over vacation. And the girls basketball team went to a tournament away from home and they won all of their games, which is very exciting for them. Most notably, our midterm exams start the 22nd and go until the 25th. So during that week, we have 2 exams per day, and we have a 30-minute break in between the, I think, hour and 45-minute sessions. And then there are 3 rounds of buses that leave from the school, one right after exams at 12:50, one at the normal ending time, 3:05, and then a late bus at 4:30. There's a dance, the snowball, on the last day of finals, that Friday, the 25th. And the Saturday after exams, we'll host our first ever home debate tournament, which is exciting. And Ms. Philippone wanted me to say that we are not going to be able to know the graduation date until the beginning of March because we need to factor snow days into the decision.
No pressure.
It's never an issue.
Yeah. Okay, moving to discussion items. You have in your backup material the New Hampshire School Board Assembly resolutions, including ours. The recommendation from the School Boards Association is that we vote on, take a position on each proposed resolution, which we haven't done in the past. What we've done in the past is pretty much you've allowed the representative to use his or her judgment, because then you hear the discussion. And but if people have opinions about these, or if you'd rather go through and vote on each one individually, that'll be okay too. But I just want to hear your guidance in terms of how to move forward with these resolutions. Denise?
I'm wondering if we could go ahead and just vote on them as a slate, unless there are specific resolutions that board members would like to pull out to discuss individually. Otherwise, I'd like to just move to vote on them as a slate, I guess, or whatever.
But each one has a different recommendation from the School Boards Association.
Right.
Some are they endorse, some they don't endorse.
Right.
So I don't know what the slate would look like. I mean, is the slate the
slate could be to go with the resolutions as presented. In other words,
Can I just jump in, Denise? So if we did that, we'd actually be telling Tom to go to the meeting and vote against our own resolution.
Oh.
Because the board has taken a position against our resolution in relation to guns in schools being at the discretion of local governance. So in the past, what you've done is, you've sent your representative off and you've said, use your best judgment.
Right.
That's where you just trust the person who's going. Otherwise, you do have to go through these one at a time
Okay.
and tell Tom what you want him to say.
Got it, okay.
And there's some that I'd like to hear the discussion, like, like the one giving alternative, having to get parents' approval for alternative instruction during, I mean, I'm not sure how I would vote on that. I'd like to hear the conversation on that one. It's interesting, there's another one that's not as detailed as ours about, guns in schools. And it seems like there's a number of them that pretty much endorse the position the school boards have taken traditionally, which is opposing the voucher system. And I think they think we've pretty much, that's a pretty much ongoing work of the School Boards Association. So they don't necessarily need another resolution on those. So.
I think it would be interesting to communicate with whoever is representing Keene.
I think I'll do that, yeah. And I've also gotten communication from Exeter. They were going to do a resolution similar to this, but they decided not to do it because of ours. And I was really surprised by just the way they, just the argument that they don't want to get into that issue. Okay, I mean, that doesn't seem like a good argument to me.
Not getting into it is, I think ours is the epitome of not getting into it. Like,
yeah.
Have the state completely bow out of it.
Yeah, yeah. So
I support the, I think it's both Keene and I think there was one right before it that support and Raymond, letting the school districts themselves decide what works best, because I think so much is a factor of your local community and that. And the other one that I supported, I think it was Masenic, is it? No, it was Raymond again. I support them saying that we don't need to get parent approval for the alternative activity if a kid is not taking the preordained assessment. I just think that could become so complicated with lots of kids opting out and having to get parental approval for each of those little things. So I really support that Raymond one as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say, first of all, I can't even believe that the School Board Association is not in line with us in terms of guns. It's I'm just kind of, what is the purpose of the School Board Association if you can't support something so basic? I guess perhaps I would hope that you can work with Keene to say, let's, team together to explain this, because it really is the height of insanity to me that the state is putting money into securing the entryways of schools, but you can still bring a gun into the school. So it's kind of it's a weird way to have a building aid program, probably the least effective way to have a building program. It's nonsensical, and I think, again, if the School Board Association can't take a position on something basic as school safety, my question is, really, what is their point? It fundamentally causes me to question the viability of the organization.
I agree.
Well, I mean, I think the organization has done great things, but I think this seems to be one of the things that I might say when I speak is that, my understanding of being on a school board has evolved, because at first I thought I'd be doing instructional things all the time, and of course we're not. And I thought, you come to think that your fundamental concern, your groundwork is safety. Everything comes on top of safety. If there's not safety, none of the stuff works. And so something like this seems to be about the groundwork of what school boards do. So we'll see how the discussion goes. But I think to reach out to Keene and Exeter, and to get, because I got an email communication from Exeter to see if the three of us can maybe coordinate speaking for it. So.
Yeah, I would just point out, too, that at the last assembly, the resolution around guns only failed by 5 points.
Yeah.
And it was a much more directive resolution than this one. This one is saying, let us make up our own minds.
Yeah, I mean,
So I think,
the
even
district
though...
wouldn't have to do anything. I mean, they could stay,
I think a compelling argument could sway.
Yeah. Okay. So it's agreeable to people that I go and listen to the discussion, and if any of you have opinions about these, just, you can communicate with me, but
Make us proud.
I'll do my best, Al. I appreciate the support. Okay.
Do you want a motion that we support your stances and?
Sure.
Yeah, so I would move that, Tom as our representative, listen to discussions and use his best judgment, which is always excellent, and vote accordingly.
Well, thank you, Kenny. Moved by Kenny.
I'll second.
Second by Denise. All those in favor? Okay, I'm honored. Budget, Sue?
Yes. So at your last board meeting, we had presented a budget where we assume we have a lower health rate and we shaved $100,000. So that's the budget that stands now. That's what we've prepared all of our documents on. And you have a public hearing next week, so we want to make sure that's where you want to go with that. In regards to that $100,000, if in fact we don't have a lower health insurance rate, it would come out of fund balance. And right now, as you recall, when we were talking about adding a position to the high school, we had considerable savings in salaries. We still have that savings, so I'm quite sure that we could probably find that this year out of the fund balance.
Okay. Denise?
I'm confused. So out of this year's fund balance?
Yeah, so what happens is this year's fund balance goes and gets applied to next year's tax rate, and next year's tax rate is set based on this next year's budget. So the fund balance we have left at the end of this year will be applied to the tax rate in October, which is set based on the budget you vote on this year.
Okay.
So I anticipated 350.
Got it.
If it's higher than that, that will offset that 100,000 if health insurance doesn't in fact come in lower.
Okay.
Okay? And if that doesn't happen, for some reason, you remember you have your emergency fund that can be used for tax relief, and that's your authority to approve that.
Okay.
So we have a couple of options if, in fact, we don't have that 100,000 from health.
And which fund are you talking about there? You're referring to
The emergency,
fund or the emergency?
retained fund balance. That would be the one I would go to first, yes.
Now, another question. So are we still using 100,000 from the stabilization?
No, we wouldn't do that, no.
Okay, so
I think
that one's
this would be the
not-
best scenario, the best way to present
Okay.
it.
Okay, that's where I.
If you agree, all agree to that.
confusion was. Okay.
Does that
So
make sense?
Sue and I feel like that, we went round and round with the discussion a couple of times now, and we feel comfortable that we can make it work.
Sue, I'm going to ask you the question I asked you over the phone today, because I think our estimates for the tax impact traditionally are higher.
Yes.
And part of the reason for that, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, so in that the bottom left-hand corner, do you see that?
In the yellow.
On the first page of where you have like tax rate impact?
You're looking at this
Yellow.
sheet?
Yeah, it's yellow.
Yep.
I don't have the color.
Here.
Okay. You're not accounting for any increase in appraised,
An assessment. I am not.
Assessment.
I do not do that.
So it's quite likely, I think, in Lee, that Brian, that there will be more assessed property to be assessed because there's been building in Lee, but you're not counting that.
I don't, because I don't know what it
So
is.
it's likely that this number is high because because it doesn't count in property that's probably going to be
Correct.
added to the tax rolls. Is that
Correct.
correct?
And that has been the case in most years, that we have increased assessment in all the districts, and that changes what the rate will actually be.
And that's why we tend to be, one of the reasons we tend to be higher.
Right.
Okay, be conservative, okay.
Mhm.
Other questions for Sue about this? Michael?
As a general question, so we have a large amount budgeted for design services for the middle school project. What's the basis of that amount?
It was to get us to, as Ron alluded to in his presentation, it was to get us to the place where we would have our steel and our groundwork and our foundation drawings ready the minute the voters approved it.
How much flexibility is there in that number?
None. In fact, they would have asked for more, but I said I can't find more.
So I think this is an interesting budget year in that we have a couple of very large new expenditures. The Mohammed project, design services for the middle school, and the Siemens facility lease kicking in. But besides that, there's no crisis here. There's no dramatic change in staffing needed. There's no, there's no urgent maintenance facility need that's requiring urgent attention. And even at that, we're still at 3.5% of our apportionment impact. And I'm concerned that that is more than where we should be, and that we should be looking for another $100,000 to get us back down to the 3.25% range on the local tax impact side.
Well, I guess to this point, Michael, we've been following your guidance, and the guidance up to this point is to find $100,000, and we did that by taking a gamble. I think it's an okay gamble, or otherwise we wouldn't be recommending it. But I would be uncomfortable trying to find another $100,000 because we didn't get that $100,000 by cutting. We are making an educated guess on what will happen with insurance. So I would be uncomfortable trying to find another $100,000.
It'd be the positions we added. We added the guidance, and we added the
Special ed.
special ed elementaries, and then the third position was Andy's secretary. Is that
That was in this budget.
That's in this budget.
Yeah,
But again,
it
so we
carries over
added
still, yeah.
those two. I mean, again,
Yeah.
I would feel uncomfortable taking those positions out. I think they're like a counterbalance to the facilities money that we put in. We really need those positions.
Well, I would suggest that they could be pieced together from a couple different places. With the high school guidance leave of absence, I think that by not replacing that as a substitute and only hiring the new person, there's probably $25,000 or $30,000 there. I think that we've got a substantial, large estimate for increase in utility usage, and I think there could probably be $20,000 come out of there. If we delay replacement of grounds equipment, there's $26,000 there. There's an additional increase in the furniture and fixtures budget of $6,000. There's a snow removal, a couple of $1,000s I think that could come out of snow removal from where we're above where we've been trending. And then if you take out $15,000 from the 800, there's $100,000.
And personally, I wouldn't recommend any of those, but
Yeah.
that's your role as a body of 7, and you can go down through those, and if there's support, then we would do it, because we're being told to do it.
I wouldn't be in support of that. I feel, I think that when we go to the voters and we can explain that because of there is money in this budget for the middle school work, it is, it's a one-time cost. And I think it can be explained why our budget increases as high as it is. And doing that kind of thing, all that does is postpone it. And to me, we're going to have the big expenditure when the middle school, assuming the middle school bond is passed, we're going to have that cost. I think we need to, I think we've done a good job of getting it where it needs to be, and I would not be in favor of trying to reduce it some more.
Other discussion, questions? So, at the next meeting, do we approve when?
So you just need to all agree on what you want us to prepare for the public hearing. So this is the budget figure. You won't vote on your budget until after the public hearing and be ready for deliberative session.
And we
So-
can't make any change, we can't add anything after.
Can't add anything after. Can't add anything. Or you can, but you'd have to have another public hearing, so.
So do you want a motion to approve this to be
Sure,
presented?
if you want to do that, to approve these figures for public hearing, that would be fine.
Okay. Do I have a motion? No?
Motion to approve as presented, this for the public hearing.
Moved by Al, is there a second? Second by Denise. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 6 in favor, the student rep in favor, all those opposed? 1 opposed? Okay, this will be presented to the voters.
And then the next thing is the default budget. At your last meeting, I presented a default budget that was like $1 million and something lower than the current budget. And Dr. Morris and I talked with our attorney and went through each item line by line, and the number is quite different than what we presented to you at the last meeting. It's actually, I think you have the new copy of the default budget, but it's not reflected in your warrant.
This is
So
in the
then-
folder, or is it?
It was in your agenda.
Right.
It was in your agenda, the default, and the default was correct. The only thing that's not correct is your warrant has the wrong number on it. We didn't revise that number. So the $46,850,794 is the new default number.
Okay.
It's $554,716 less than your proposed budget. So that's
I'm sorry, see how much less than it is?
$554,716. That is the
Okay.
difference between your operating budget and your default.
Okay.
So in your packet, you do have a new warrant,
Right.
and that reflects that new number, because that was not included in your agenda. So those are just some items that we needed to make adjustments to.
Denise?
So one question that I have is, and I'm happy to see that you were able to make that adjustment upward to the default, but I'm wondering if we should still have an explanation that just says something about how the procedure has changed, or, you know, if we need to kind of explain, you know, why it's different this year, or whatever.
Well, what we can do is we are preparing a PowerPoint, and in the PowerPoint, we outline the difference. We can explain those differences.
Okay.
And basically, the differences that I ran into that we agreed to were the health insurance for non-union employees was not included. Obviously, all of the increases for non-union employees was not included, and the utility increases were not included. That's different than what I've done in the past.
Okay.
So do you need, I'm sorry, you keep asking this, do you need a motion to approve the warrants, or is that? or is-
No, there's no need for that, because you'll be back doing that at a later date. I mean, I don't believe we discussed the warrants at the, I think we just present them as a draft at the public meeting, at the public hearing, and then you will vote for them.
Okay, I think we had this question last time about the order.
Yes, and we've changed the order, because this is what is recommended by our attorney and by the Department of Revenue.
Okay, so when you approve the budget in Article 3, does that include the numbers that are in Article 4?
It does not. It never has. Even when it was on the bottom, it never has.
Okay,
Never has.
so you're approving the budget without,
Without warrants. Warrants are
Without the
separate and they're
warrant,
added
that's
too.
an addition.
So that number will not match your yellow sheet that I gave you in total, because actually I did separate that out when I put that on there, so.
okay.
So are we okay with that to move forward at this point?
Okay,
And then we do have on here to assign you for your presentation, but that doesn't happen until deliberative, right?
But I can-
Presenting,
I can assign.
Sure.
I can assign.
yep.
So I'll make a motion to assign Al to do warrant 4 or 3, Dan Klein to do warrant 4 because he was on the negotiating committee, and Michael to do the presentation of the volunteer. Those are the 3 things we present. So I'll make that motion as a block. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
By Denise?
I'm sorry, what's Michael doing?
He's going to present, there's a volunteer
The
award.
volunteer.
Oh, yes, all right, the recognition one, yeah.
Okay. So is that all right?
Where, if we're talking about having concept drawings in middle school, where does that fit into the deliberative, and who's going to present that?
Well, that's a good question, because I was having that conversation with Ron today, because Ron will be present, and I'm thinking that it should be both of us presenting the concept around the middle school.
You and Ron, not you and
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, we could do it too, Michael, but no, I was thinking me and Ron.
Would you do it right before we do the warrants?
I think so. I have to check with I have to figure out what the process is, so it'll be another call to Diana, our attorney, to figure out how do we incorporate that into a deliberative session.
I would
Yeah.
suggest doing it after the warrants and make that kind of an informational kind of thing, get through the legal business.
Yeah, people will just leave, yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather, I mean, while you have a captive audience there, it's like better to do it, you know, if, even need be, could you do it before we actually?
Oh, yeah.
800,000 in this budget is to get moving on the school. So I mean, it is related to warrant 3.
Right.
So it won't be Michael and Williams and me, it'll be you and I, Al. Although we could incorporate it in Michael's presentation on the recognition award.
But we can figure that, we don't have to figure that out.
You don't have to figure that out now.
Yeah.
So
Definitely
just,
the architect's going to be there because he needs to be there.
And we had a meeting today, and it's like really, I think everybody wants to see what it might look like, but he says, once you put that image out there, then people will say, okay, that's what it's going to be, and then if something gets changed, you know, we saw this, you know, it seems like a promise. So it's kind of this conundrum that the less specific it is, the more open it can be later on, but I think people are kind of, you know, to imagine what that school might look like on that site is really kind of a step that we want to take. So they're talking about how specific you know, if you use images, how specific should it be, and of course with all kinds of qualifications before it's presented. So we'll figure that out. Okay.
So Sue, in
Just-
terms of next week,
yes, just a reminder that we are at the high school auditorium next Tuesday, January 8th, for our public hearing on the budget. And we are preparing that PowerPoint, and Dr. Morse, you usually do that presentation.
Yep.
And just make sure everybody knows that. We have a snow date for Wednesday.
yep, and, you know, Michael had suggested earlier that in addition to the postcards, and we sent them out earlier.
You should have
Everybody
received them.
should have received their
Yeah, you should have
postcards.
received those. Yeah.
Just heads nodding that you got them.
Yeah.
That I use School Messenger this week to remind people about next week, and to use School Messenger when we hit February to remind them about February. So we'll be doing that as well. So,
And you will be at Durham, we'll be at Durham on Monday.
yes, I'll be Durham on Monday, and, you know, I think that'll go fine, and I'll be in Madbury, and that'll go fine, and Brian's going to stand in front of me when I do leave to protect
Brian's going to be
me.
your food taster.
But, you know, yeah, Michael and Dan were there for me when I was doing Madbury, so it was just the years to flow like that sometimes, and it'll be tough, but it's real. We know why. 12% increase in valuation and more students, so just not going to be an easy meeting.
Did you need a vote on the?
I don't think we had a vote on the assignment of,
Oh,
did we?
Oh, you didn't vote
No
on it?
vote, okay.
yeah.
Could we vote on the presentation of warrant articles? Ready? All in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor, okay.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
So we're down to like, we're going to establish workshop dates for the strategic plan.
Yep.
So today I started working on sort of an executive summary because of the size of the document, and people were looking for something a little bit more encapsulated, and I'll have that ready for the next meeting. What I had suggested to Tom and Denise as we were thinking through this, because we left time in this part of the year, January, February, March, to workshop the strategic plan. And it's really, I think that we should be using regularly scheduled board meetings to do that, not have another meeting on top of all the other meetings that you've already committed to, and utilize time that you've already scheduled to work through the strategic plan over the next 3 months. That's what my recommendation would be, and then we just take a small piece each night and each meeting. If we have 6 meetings, you know, we could look at a couple of sections per meeting and have a conversation, and then take whatever input you guys have and make whatever modifications you think are important, and then move on to the next section. I guess that's how I would approach
Something like
it.
take the first hour to workshops, and then
That's what I would do. Because that way, you know, I always get concerned about all of you, because all of your time is volunteer, and to add on top of that, and each of you has different draws on your time. So if we did it that way, then we're using time you've already committed to. So an hour, I think over 6 meetings, we could get through it relatively smoothly.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you guys?
And
Right.
and then that, so then we wouldn't have the final approval until,
Yeah, I don't need the final approval until April vacation, in
Okay.
May,
So that
because
would
it
give us
doesn't,
enough time,
it'll take effect in July. And, going back a ways, Michael had asked, how can you build a budget if we haven't got the approved strategic plan? Well, as you guys probably have started to look at it, it's really a continuation of the work we've been doing, but articulating where we're going in the next 5 years. So as long as we approve it before we break, either around April vacation or May, I think that's fine. And I built that into the schedule right from the beginning. If you go back to the schedule I gave you guys in July, there was this big hole where there weren't special presentations going on. That was where I was thinking we would do this work anyway, so.
So my only concern of it stretching over that period is there's the theoretical possibility that we'll have new board members in the middle of that process.
That's true, but it wouldn't,
Have to
but it
address
wouldn't
that.
change the draft, right? The draft would still be the draft, whether there's a new person here or not. And that's always the possibility in the election cycle, that somebody new comes on and they're kind of catching up. So what I typically do is ask that new person if they would like to sit down and get caught up, and Tom's been great at that with me. So if we do have somebody to come, new face, then we take the time to bring them up to speed.
So we don't really have to establish new dates, we just have to establish which meetings we're going to use for that first hour to workshop, and then set up a schedule as to which parts of the strategic plan we're looking at. Okay. That'll be something to do in the agenda meetings. So we don't need to approve the warrant articles tonight, is that, or?
No.
Okay, so we don't need a motion to approve the warrant articles. So I think, unless I'm missing something, are we ready to go down policies? Okay. So we have like two policies for final second read. Denise, I don't know if you want to make a motion on those?
sure. I'll make a motion to adopt IJ, Instructional Resources, and JICL, Student Computer and Internet Use for second read.
Moved by Denise, is there a second? Second by Brian. Questions, discussion? Hearing none. Ready to vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor. Those two policies are approved for second read. School committee updates. Manifest committee met, right?
Manifest met, we did a great job.
Okay, good. Good to hear. Other committees that have met? Probably not over the break,
I
right?
just had 2 questions.
Okay.
One, just getting back to the Orchard Drive, so that's going to be on the agenda for the town's land stewardship committee Tuesday.
Okay.
And I heard what you said, Dr. Morse, about kind of the dollar figure maybe the district is shooting for. And through that committee, we've done big fundraising for different properties in Durham. Is there a time frame that we should be working towards?
So Dennis asked me that very question, and I said, really, there's really no time frame pressure. So I said, if it could happen over the course of a year, I think we'd be fine. So I felt a year was reasonable, considering that they had to do it from small donations.
Okay. And this second thing, when we were talking about the mission statement for the middle school, and I spoke and I proposed my idea, but that was just me, and I think we probably as a board should decide whether that should be incorporated. And Tom, maybe you with the representative relay that, because I get the sense the takeaway from the people incorporated that, but I just spoke, and I think we should have consensus on that, because I'm just one of 7
Okay,
on that.
so we should maybe bring mission statement back and have like it, edit it, if we're going to modify it as a board? Is that?
Yeah, the way I wanted to just add that phrase to the 3 on
Well,
top, that was
the phrase was,
He blocked it in, it was,
yeah, so,
yeah, emotional well-being.
right, and so I didn't want that to be permanent because we, as a group, didn't decide that. That was just an idea.
well, I would be, although it's kind of out of sequence of I think it's fine to have that in there. We talked about that a lot, and it would be consistent with what we've done. So if you'd want to propose to insert that, then and we could vote on it, then we could have it done. Or do you want, is that all right?
Yeah, I just didn't want my one voice to get carried forward. So I could move that we add to the mission statement that thing, emotional well-being.
So you wound it up with the 3.
Right.
And then Brian had indicated that as a subtext, it appears in a lower section. So really, the lower section will speak to the fact that it's in the body of the mission.
Right.
So we don't have to change anything other than just to add emotional well-being.
The only thing
Am I reading that right, Ken?
I'm sorry?
Am I articulating
Yes,
that right?
totally.
Good.
The only thing that I also agree with, as long as we're going to add that, is to perhaps consider switching that order to have academic be first, now that
Yeah.
we don't have that concern.
Well, now we could.
Yeah, so
Okay.
academic,
Okay.
safety,
Yeah.
however,
Emotional health.
whatever, emotional and sustainability,
Okay.
whatever.
Basis.
Just-
I've got it. I've got it. Yeah.
Okay, academic comes first, and we'll add
I think if you're going to add, you should
Okay.
add emotional well-being second,
Okay.
because it goes with the academics.
Okay, so that's the motion, is to make those 2 changes.
Exactly.
Okay, we get a motion, are you seconding?
Sure, I'll second that,
Okay,
yes.
are we okay with that now? All those in favor, raise your hand. Yeah, okay, so I can go ahead and do that. Okay, thank you. Other committees? Okay, public comment? No? Okay, closing, you have all the future dates down here. So we need to go into non-public session now to do the work on the superintendent's evaluation. So could I have a motion to go into non-public session? Kenny?
So under New Hampshire State Law, RSA 91-A:3, 2, subtitle A, we'll call it just the promotion or compensation of a public employee.
Okay, moved by Kenny, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Denise, roll call.
Dan Klein, yes.
Michael Williams, yes.
Kenny Rotman, yes.
Denise Day, yes.
Tom Newkirk, yes.
Al Holland, yes.
Brian Cisneros, yes.
Okay, so we're into non-public.
I don't want to